Be sure to subscribe to the channel, and let's promote respect for the Royal Guard together. Let the whole world see how many of us there are.
Karen poured green paint on a guard, thinking her money gave her the right to do anything. But his reaction shocked everyone. What happened next turned everything upside down. It was a sunny midday in London, with the sky clear and the air filled with the smells of street food and freshly baked pastries. Everything was as usual, except for the people hustling through the streets, taking photos and trying to capture the moment with the guards. These living statues, standing at the tower, had become something of an open-air museum, embodying the essence of old Britain. And guard Thomas Walker, as always, stood still. His bright red uniform and his black bear fur hat gleamed under the sun's rays. His gaze was focused somewhere in the distance, his face expressionless, as though it held neither emotion nor thought. His calling was to be part of this living tradition. He knew the tourists were all around him, that they wanted photos, that they expected something special. But he was ready for this. This was his job. But today was a little different. As soon as Thomas saw her, he realized this day would not be like the others. She stood out from the crowd like a bright spot, immediately attracting everyone's attention. Karen, in a tight pink dress that looked more like a casing for what was hidden beneath. Her weight was the equivalent of several people packed into one body. Her face was tear-streaked, with greasy dark hair, short and disheveled. She moved as though everything around her was at her command, as if she were the queen of her own kingdom. And as soon as Karen approached, her lips stretched into a mocking grin, and she shouted loudly, drawing the attention of the entire crowd. "Hey, aren't you hot, handsome? Are you standing on guard or posing for a photo shoot? Are you even alive?" Karen's voice echoed across the square, and her words carried that typical tourist sarcasm that often hides a complete lack of respect for foreign culture and traditions. It wasn't just a joke, it was an entire army of self-assertion exploding into the air. The crowd began to laugh in response, nodding in agreement with her boldness, throwing mocking glances at him. In the eyes of those around them, it was like, well, he can't respond, can he? That moment when everything seems to pause, because as an observer, you realize he stands like a statue, and she's the actress in her own show. But what would she do next? Karen took a step forward, walking right up to the guard. In her hands, she held a can of bright green paint, and then it was simple. She poured it straight onto his uniform. Yes, right onto him. This wasn't just some funny prank or a silly joke. This was an act of humiliation. Karen, her face glowing with satisfaction, watched as the paint slowly spread across the fabric, as though it were simply part of her game, her amusement. She was a tourist, she had paid money, and therefore she could do anything she wanted. And those statues? Well, they were part of the decor. Just like that. The crowd, of course, applauded. Laughter, approving shouts. Some even started recording the scene with their cameras, to show everyone how they had fun in London, how they pranked the guard. But the question remained, the guard, well, he wasn't supposed to react, right? Everyone knows how this works. You stand, he stands, and no one moves. But it wasn't quite like that. The green paint slowly, like an accidental stream, dripped down Thomas's shiny red uniform. It left behind wet stains that soaked into the fabric, and now it seemed as though those stains had become part of his essence. This wasn't just dirt. This was humiliation, and the paint wouldn't come off, no matter how hard they tried to wipe it away. Karen, standing with the can in her hand, took a step back and watched with a satisfied smile as her gesture, her little victory, spread across the guard's uniform. She couldn't hide her triumph. Her eyes sparkled, and her mouth involuntarily stretched into an even wider smirk. This is it. This is entertainment, she thought, savoring the moment. Finally, she was the center of attention, and no one could stop her. The crowd erupted in laughter. People started shouting approving phrases, capturing every moment on their cameras, ready to brag about this episode on social media. "Oh, this is amazing. Look at him doing nothing. Did you see that? He's like a stone," shouted a woman in a white t-shirt, moving closer to the center to film the scene on her phone. The laughter grew louder, and all the "show me another one like this" only fueled Karen's audacity. She took a step forward, getting closer to the guard, trying to get into the frame. Of course, taking a photo with him was her goal, not just provoking him. She loved seeing the admiration in the eyes of those around her for her wit. Karen scurried around, turning and crouching in ways that would allow her to snap the perfect shot, standing right in front of Thomas. She snapped her fingers, as if commanding him to move, all to amplify her moment of victory. Her expression was bright and celebratory, full of smugness and confidence. It was as if she were thinking, "Wow, I just turned his world upside down. Here it is, the moment of glory. What will he do now?" As if Thomas were a puppet dangling from her strings. But unmoving, as always, the guard stayed still. His face remained as stone-like as ever, his eyes cold and frozen. However, if anyone in the crowd had looked closely, they would have noticed a slight tension in his eyes. It wasn't so much anger, but more an inner restraint, a suppressed fury that couldn't break free. He wasn't one to break his rules, to succumb to provocation. But here, in this situation, the line had been crossed. The crowd continued laughing, as if they were at a show, getting even louder, catching every moment on their phones. Karen, certain she was at the peak of her fame, looked at Thomas, scanning him with her gaze, and couldn't resist another jab. "Well, aren't you even going to say thank you?" Her voice was full of sarcasm, and her smugness was undeniable. "I've entertained you. Aren't you happy?" It wasn't just cheeky. It was rude. It was a petty act from someone who had never thought her actions could backfire. It was a provocation, fueled by the confidence that her status as a tourist gave her the absolute right to do whatever she wanted to this guard. To put it bluntly, she saw him as part of the decor, a figure she could manipulate however she pleased. Disrespect without boundaries. But what did Thomas do? He didn't respond. He didn't move. But here's the twist. Within that silence was more power than in any word, and that silence was starting to gain strength, turning her victory into her own mistake. In the very height of her triumph, when the laughter and approval from the crowd seemed inevitable, an elderly man stepped out of the crowd. This was Jonathan, an old veteran who often visited the tower to reminisce about his youth. He had witnessed everything that had happened, and his view of the situation was completely different. "Don't you see what you're doing?" His voice was sharp and loud, drawing the attention of everyone. "You're insulting not only this man, but all of Britain, its traditions, and its royal guard." Karen stopped, not expecting anyone to dare argue with her. She frowned, but Jonathan wasn't about to hold back. He stepped closer to her and continued, not allowing her any excuses. "You can laugh, but this isn't just a uniform and paint. This is honor and history. You've violated something greater than just traditions." Jonathan's words began to resonate in the air, and this time the laughter in the crowd quieted. And then Thomas, still standing like a statue, suddenly took a step forward. He slowly turned toward Karen, his face still stone-like, but his eyes were ice-cold, and his voice was quiet but firm. "I hope you realize this isn't a joke. You've shown that you don't appreciate what keeps this place alive." Karen froze. With every word, her confidence melted away. The onlookers began to support Jonathan, and now her actions didn't seem so funny. The crowd started to whisper and show disapproval. Karen felt her victory slipping out of her grasp. Karen, realizing that she had lost control of the situation, began to retreat in panic, glancing nervously at the crowd. Her confidence evaporated, and now she was trying to dodge the disapproving gazes, but with every step, her disgrace was immortalized. Suddenly, her path was blocked by police officers, who had been called by someone in the crowd, noticing that the situation had crossed the line. "What's going on?" Karen started protesting, trying to justify herself, but her voice no longer held the same confidence. "I was just joking." The police officers remained calm, their faces devoid of emotion, much like Thomas's. Karen tried to fight back, but it was already too late. Her actions had sparked public condemnation. The crowd, which had been laughing just moments ago, now furrowed their brows, their eyes burning with judgment. Soon, the streets of London echoed not only with the sounds of her voice, but with countless reposts and comments condemning her behavior. The video of the incident quickly went viral. On social media, people wrote, "Traditions and respect for culture must be upheld, regardless of the foolishness of generations that don't understand the meaning behind them." Comments demanding the restoration of respect for British symbols piled up like an avalanche. And now there was no laughter, no admiration for her actions. In the eyes of the onlookers, Karen had become a symbol of ignorance and misunderstanding. The police escorted her off the square, and soon all of London knew about her shameful act. At that moment, Jonathan, the old veteran who had been standing nearby, finally approached Thomas. He smiled, pleased that justice had prevailed. "You did the right thing, lad," Jonathan said quietly with respect. "No paint can erase dignity." Thomas, without saying a word, adjusted his black bearskin hat again, and, despite the paint stains on his uniform, returned to his post. He stood at attention once more, motionless, as always. The crowd, now on his side, began applauding, admiring his resilience. The viewers, satisfied with the sense of justice, once again aimed their cameras at the guard and posted new videos with enthusiastic comments about how important it is to respect traditions and preserve culture. Thomas had become a symbol of pride and honor for Britain. Meanwhile, Karen would forever remain in London not as a fun tourist, but as an example of how easily one can lose respect by playing with traditions and culture.